Seriously, the elite hunters from the scavenger guild, some of the best in the world, hopped out of their vehicles. "What's going on?" they asked, sounding worried. Thomas gave quick, short answers to his anxious team. "It's already started. I'll take the lead. Follow me." "Well, wait, what's happening?" one of them asked, confused. Thomas didn't answer. He just crouched down and moved forward before anyone could ask more questions. Thomas's leg muscles flexed as the hot asphalt rippled under his feet. The other hunters backed off, their eyes wide with fear. Suddenly Thomas sprang into the air like a superhero, disappearing in an instant. "There's something is coming this way," someone whispered. Whatever it was super strong and moving like a bullet. Just as Thomas could feel Jin-Woo's power surging, Jin-Woo also sensed Thomas's. Jin-Woo froze, one hand gripping Dong-soo by the collar, the other hanging mid-air. Dong-soo looked just as badly hurt as Jin-Yo. Then, with a loud boom, part of the factory roof crumbled. Thomas landed on the ground like a superhero, ready for action. Jin-Woo didn't even blink as he whipped around to face him. Thomas popped up onto his feet, scanning the area around him. His eyes darted back and forth between Jin-Woo, his hand, and then locked onto Dong-soo. He furrowed his brow. It was like Jin-Woo's energy totally overwhelmed everything else around him. Thomas snatched off his shades. "Is Dong-soo Hong still alive?" "For now," Thomas said slowly and clearly. He wanted to make sure Jin-Woo could understand him easily. "Let him go, and I'll pretend this never happened. Okay?" But Jin-Woo just gripped Dong-soo's collar even tighter. "What if I say no?" he sneered. Thomas stood his ground. "I'm not asking," he said firmly. His tone made it clear. He was one of the strongest hunters in the world, and he wouldn't back down. Most hunters would have been totally terrified. But Jin-Woo didn't even flinch. He stood there steady as a rock. "Come at me then," he dared. Thomas's eyebrow shot up in surprise. If any other hunter had talked to him like that, he would have pounced instantly. After all, Thomas was a national-level hunter like a boss, who nobody messed with. It was a reward for saving 300 million Americans from the biggest disaster ever. Now Thomas faced Jin-Woo Sung, so he couldn't just do as he pleased. His hands shook with anger, and he clenched his teeth while glaring at Dong-soo. He had told him not to do anything, just like he thought. Jin-Woo wasn't going to be an easy opponent. Seeing him in person made everything real. If Thomas had to describe this feeling, he'd say it was like being stuck in quicksand. Each step felt risky, as if one wrong move would pull Thomas under. The dark and mysterious energy coming from the Korean hunter made things even scarier, but Thomas couldn't back down now. Jin-Woo had the top hunter from the scavenger guild right where he wanted him. And more than that, Thomas' pride as a hunter on a national level was at stake. He frowned and then asked his question. "Do you know who I am?" Thomas asked with a smirk. Jin-Woo didn't blink. "I don't care who you are." Just then Dong-soo's eyes snapped open. He glared at Thomas and shouted, "Sir, hurry up and kill this guy." Before anyone could react, Jin-Woo swung his fist. Thud, Dong-soo's head snapped back, and he crumpled to the ground, out cold. Thomas's jaw dropped in shock. "Whoa," he muttered, clearly stunned by Jin-Woo's bold move. "Are you kidding me?" Jin-Woo's voice was shaking with anger. Even though he knew exactly who Thomas was, Thomas looked furious, like he could explode at any second. He had a reputation for handling people who crossed him. People rarely dared challenge him more than once. Thomas grew up in a tough part of town. His family struggled to make ends meet as immigrants, and he was the only white kid in a school, mostly filled with African American students. But Thomas never let that stop him from standing his ground. Thomas had a knack for making enemies wherever he went. A single look could ignite a brawl, and more often than not, he was outnumbered. Many times he faced armed foes. But Thomas didn't need weapons. He had something even better, incredible physical strength that allowed him to overpower anyone who dared challenge him. Ironically enough, his tough hometown turned out to be the perfect place to test his skills. Thomas used his power in amazing ways, and over time people's reactions began to change. He ruled like a king, controlling everything with authority, money and strength. He figured out early on that in this world, power decides if you're the boss or just a follower. So when a new kind of power came along, he grabbed it and made sure everyone knew he was in charge. When people didn't do what he wanted, he showed them who's boss with his strength. He made sure everyone who smirked at him ended up showing some respect. He got rid of anyone standing in his path. He knew his strength was what made him who he was, and he relied on it completely. Time froze for a moment. Then Thomas sprang toward Jin-Woo, and they were face to face in an instant. As their noses almost touched, their eyes locked. "You're just clueless," Thomas shouted. He grabbed Jin-Woo's head with his super strong grip, a weapon no one could match. With one squeeze, he could crush even the toughest hunter's skull. Victory seemed sure now. But then, what? A flash of light blinded him for a second. Meanwhile, the Scavenger Guild hunters arrived just in time to see something smash through the factory wall like a speeding bullet. Boom! The whole wall came crashing down as whatever it was skidded to a halt right in front of them. They were totally shocked. "Thomas," someone shouted. "Sir, are you okay? Who could have done this to Thomas Andre?" Everyone's eyes were wide in disbelief. Steam was rising from his whole body because of the huge impact. If he were just a regular person, sliding across the pavement like that would have ripped his skin right off, or being thrown through the wall would have broken him into pieces. Thomas was perfectly okay, which wasn't a surprise since he was the tank who had endured Kamish's flames. But as he stood up, his face told a different story. He scowled fiercely, his eyes narrowing as he looked around at the others. They were all part of the same guild, but the fierce glare from this top-tier hunter made everyone else pale. Without a word, Thomas stomped off toward the abandoned factory, clearly fumming. The vice guild master suddenly snapped out of his daze and shouted orders at the rest of the members. "Don't just stand there. Move!" In an instant, over 100 of the world's top hunters surged forward. Jin-Woo tightened his fist after sending Thomas flying. If he'd arrived even a moment later, Jin-Woo might have been in grave danger. Seeing Dong-So slam Jino's head to the ground through the eyes of the higher soldier had made Jin-Woo's anger erupt. So when Thomas suggested they just forget everything that happened, Jin-Woo thought it was totally ridiculous. Jin-Woo kept pushing himself to the limit to avoid being bossed around by those in charge. Thomas's idea wasn't worth thinking about. When Jin-Woo refused, Thomas responded with a major attack. The fight was far from over. Thomas came back even angrier than before. Jin-Woo tossed the unconscious Dong-So aside and summoned Kaesol and Igris. A shadowy dragon with wings spread wide and a knight appeared. Jin-Woo carefully picked up Jinyo and handed him to Igris. "Take Jinyo to the nearest hospital," Jin-Woo instructed. "Do everything you can to save him." Igris bowed, then mounted the winged dragon and took off. The dragon let out a loud screech as it flew away. Thomas didn't flinch, keeping his focus on Jin-Woo. Jin-Woo locked eyes with Thomas, whose face twisted in rage. Behind him, around 100 guildmates rushed to his side. Jin-Woo figured Thomas had brought every top hunter from the Scavenger Guild, supposedly the best of the best. So what? No big deal. "Hey, I've got an army too," Jin-Woo said with a grin. He called up his shadow soldiers who were ready to fight at a moment's notice. Darkness crept out from beneath Jin-Woo's feet, and one by one, shadowy figures began to appear. The sight was so awe-inspiring that it made Thomas freeze in his tracks. There were thousands of them, filling the old factory all the way to the back. But it wasn't just about numbers, these soldiers were seriously powerful. Some of these shadow soldiers were as strong as top-level hunters. There was a towering knight with an enormous shield, a mysterious spellcaster wrapped in a hooded robe, and even giants lumbering at the rear. Thomas's eyes widened in surprise as he took in the sheer force before him. Thomas wondered if even the Scavenger Guild at full strength could take down Jin-Woo's creepy creatures. They gave him goosebumps just thinking about them. But at the same time he was a little scared, but also really excited. Battling such powerful beings sounded like an epic adventure. He grinned, feeling hyped for the challenge ahead. This fight had nothing to do with Dong-Su anymore. There was only one way for him to fix his hurt pride. He'd take down that disrespectful guy. But before things went down, he gave Jin-Woo one last chance. "Admit you're wrong and back off, and I'll spare your life." On Jin-Woo's response, he flipped him off. Thomas clenched his fists in anger. "How dare you!" In an instant, the powerful hunter tore off his fancy shirt. It was made from rare materials extracted from magic beasts, and didn't even think twice about it. Unscrack, 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 unscrack. His muscles bulged, and his skin hardened into armor-like plates all over his body. A surge of intense energy burst out from beneath his feet, sending shockwaves through the ground. His magic was super strong. It looked like a golden mist swirling around his shoulders. There in all its might, stood the strongest tank ever. Jin-Woo watched quietly as this transformation happened. Then he unleashed his own power with a loud whoosh. The sight of these two powerful beings left everyone amazed and breathless. Someone wondered aloud, who could take down Thomas like that? All eyes were on them now. Meet Jin-Woo Sung, the hero who conquered Japan's giants. He was more than ready to take on Thomas. The Scavenger Guild couldn't believe their eyes when they saw him. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo stayed cool and confident. This was his big chance to show how much he'd grown since then. Jin-Woo could let loose without holding anything back. Suddenly he remembered something Kamish had said. There were 4 humans who had borrowed the powers of the rulers, right? Maybe those 4 were among the 5 national-level hunters who had survived fighting the dragon. If that was true, Thomas might be one of them. Jin-Woo didn't wait, he jumped into action. Go! The king's command sent his soldiers rushing forward. Thomas shouted, "Here they come!" As nearly 1,000 minions and 100 elite hunters clashed in an epic battle. Boom! Thomas pushed Iron out of the way, charging through the chaos to find Jin-Woo, when someone suddenly attacked him fast from the side. Over there! Thomas turned around. But Jin-Woo was way too fast. In a flash, Jin-Woo was right in Thomas's face, stabbing at his waist with the Demon Monarch's dagger. But the weapon bounced off, it couldn't break through Thomas's super tough skin. Jin-Woo's eyes widened in surprise. Thomas grinned and slammed his elbow into Jin-Woo's side. Sure, Jin-Woo might be faster, but Thomas was confident. There was no way Jin-Woo could get past his defenses. The Korean hunter's eyes widened in shock as he realized how much stronger Thomas was. He thought he had this in the bag, so he kept coming at him. Then Thomas stretched out his hand, and evu-woo. Suddenly, Jin-Woo felt a strange force pulling him back, like an invisible rope, yanking him through the air. It was the same power Thomas had used earlier to grab Kamish right out of the sky, and slam him to the ground. That's how you know things just got serious. Jin-Woo and Thomas were closing in on each other fast, really fast. Jin-Woo's eyes went wide as he unleashed ruler's authority. Boom! An invisible force smashed down on Thomas, making his shoulders bulge from the strain. Thomas's eyes widened in shock. Wait, you can do that too, he muttered, stunned to discover Jin-Woo had the same power. Jin-Woo didn't waste the chance. With a quick punch to Thomas's face, Pyo Buju, she drew blood for the first time since Thomas became a hunter. The man known as Goliath roared in pain. Meanwhile, the Hunter Command Center wasn't just sitting around doing nothing. Dozens of cars packed with hunters were all heading in the same direction as the Scavenger Guild hunters. But then the car leading the pack slammed on the brakes before reaching where they were going. Adam, who had been staring nervously at the trees blurring by outside his window, jerked forward at the sudden stop. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice shaking a little. The driver turned to look at him. This wasn't just any driver. He was Agent White, the highest-ranked S-rank hunter working at the Hunter Command Center. "Agent White, what's going on here?" Adam pressed. There's no time to Adam stopped mid-sentence. He noticed how pale the driver looked. Agent White had been through countless dangerous missions, and usually seemed unshakable, but Adam had never seen him look like this before. Something was seriously wrong. Did something happen? The S-rank hunter stood his ground. "If we go any further, we'll die." Then, without warning, Jin-Woo's punch connected with a loud STF. It sent Thomas flying back. His lips split open from the force of the hit. Thomas stumbled, shocked and disoriented. How does he have this much power? The punch was so strong it left Thomas's head spinning. But here's the thing. Jin-Woo had some serious powers. He could even move things with his mind. Yet, when Thomas tried to pull him in, Jin-Woo didn't resist at all. Instead of using his power for something else, Jin-Woo used it to distract Thomas, so he could throw a punch. Thomas couldn't dodge. It was a super smart move. Thomas's own ability had actually made the punch even stronger. How many battles did it take for Jin-Woo to come up with something that cool? Even though Thomas had seen how strong Jin-Woo was, he still thought of him as a rookie until now. This changed everything. Thomas managed to land safely on the ground, but the impact was massive. Crack! The friction ripped into the cement floor. sending dust and debris flying everywhere. Jin-Woo didn't give Thomas even a second to catch his breath. He kept coming at him without letting up. The hunter, toughened from countless battles, wanted to attack before Thomas could get his bearings. But this time Thomas was quicker. Thomas knew if he kept paying attention to everything around him, he might lose. So, he decided to stop being so careful and shouted. Enforcement! In an instant, Thomas's muscles bulged even more, making him tower over 3 meters tall. He let out a mighty roar as his arms, now as thick as marble columns, shot up in the air. The sound of rushing air filled the space. Whoa! Yush! Jin-Woo, approaching cautiously, felt a surge of danger. He wasn't sure what it was, but his gut feeling had never failed him in an emergency. He slammed on the brakes and leaped out of the way just in time. Thomas's gigantic fists crashed down with tremendous power, shaking the ground hard enough to send a shock wave rippling through the air. Kaboom! The explosion was so powerful that everything in its path burst into fragments. The skill called Demolish was so mind-blowing that Jin-Woo stumbled back, even though he was already far away. Shards of debris rained down like a storm. Thomas, the Dragon Slayer, had insane strength, but Jin-Woo barely had time to process what was happening before Thomas bellowed. Capture! Suddenly, Thomas became like a black hole, sucking everything toward him with crazy force. Shadow soldiers and hunters rushed toward the massive hunter, ready for battle. Jin-Woo pushed back with ruler's authority, barely breaking free from the gravity that held him down. He jumped back just in time, as Thomas unleashed Demolish once again. Ska boom! With the explosion sent shockwaves through everyone, no matter which side they were on. Screams erupted from all directions. Arg! Someone shouted, while another cried out. Aswoo! Realizing the chaos, the Vice Guildmaster yelled urgently, get the injured to safety. Now, a few agile hunters quickly dragged the wounded away, trying to get them out of harm's way. Meanwhile Thomas charged furiously toward Jin-Woo, his anger clear in every step. Thomas was like a nation, so Jin-Woo had to pay for disrespecting him. Thomas quickly reached where his anger was aimed and swung his fist. Whoosh! The air sliced, but as expected he missed. Jin-Woo moved like a wild animal, especially in reinforcement mode, making Thomas too slow. As Thomas got stronger and better at defending himself, he started moving a bit slower, but Thomas had a trick up his sleeve to make up for this. He reached out toward Jin-Woo and shouted, Capture! Suddenly, an incredibly strong gravitational pull shot between the two hunters again. Thomas was confident he wouldn't miss this time. He wasn't about to let Jin-Woo get away like last time, especially now that his body was powered up, thanks to enforcement. Jin-Woo found himself drawn to Thomas again. Thomas tightened his right fist, pulling it back while keeping his left arm stretched out. He activated Power Smash, a skill strong enough to crush even the toughest hunter. Thomas swung his right hand forward slowly, but then something caught him off guard. Jin-Woo's arm muscles suddenly bulged up. Was he really going to take on Thomas head-to-head? Thomas's eyes widened in shock as he cranked up the gravity. But Jin-Woo didn't flinch. Instead, he used his special power, Ruler's authority, to move even faster. Crap! Thomas cursed under his breath. Jin-Woo was closing in way quicker than expected. Thomas threw a punch first, but Jin-Woo dodged quickly and countered with a powerful strike of his own. Kamateo! The blinding flash lit up the room, and Thomas felt like he'd been hit by a truck. He flew backward like a missile, crashing through the factory walls again. The impact left a long groove in the ground behind him. Matthews! Thomas groaned as he scrambled to his feet. Jin-Woo was already right there in front of him, ready for another round. Thomas roared furiously and swung his fist again. Rosala! Every swing tore through the air like a blade, leaving gaping holes in the ground. His attacks were so fierce they could crush someone without even touching them, but Jin-Woo dodged every strike, striking back at Thomas's weak points. Pow! Bam! Pow! Blood trickled inside Thomas's mouth. Irk! How can a mage hunter be this strong and fast? As Thomas's confusion grew, the pounding on his body got worse. Wait, Thomas Andre was about to lose. No way. Losing wasn't even an option for him. His strength was what made him unstoppable. Right, he clenched his teeth, which were stained with blood, and his eyes blazed with fury. Graism, drums, quickly, and hit Thomas right on the chin. Thomas shook his head hard, trying to shake off the dizziness from the hit, but Jin-Woo was already super close, throwing punch after punch. Apps pow, 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 pow. Thomas was like a mighty fortress, but even he started to stumble and fall. Thomas tripped but quickly steadied himself. Then he yelled loudly, "I'm Thomas Andre. You think that's enough to beat me?" Jin-Woo didn't care who he was and swung an uppercut. Whack! The punch connected. Thomas jerked his head back to avoid falling over. Furious, he lifted his clenched fists above his head and shouted, "Demolish!" With a loud kaboom, the ground shook violently as he slammed it. But Jin-Woo was gone. Where did he? Thomas's eyes searched around frantically before he realized there was strong magic power above him. He looked up just in time to see Jin-Woo, who had jumped right before the attack started, coming down fast. Double Jin-Woo's elbow hit Thomas right in the face. Meanwhile, a bunch of cars screeched to a halt not too far from the old factory. Getting too close might not be safe. The people stepping out of the vehicles were the best hunters around, part of the elite hunter command center team. Adam felt uneasy though. He knew they could run into Jin-Woo Sung, Thomas Andre, and the entire scavenger guild. Leading the group was Brent, a top-ranking hunter with a strong presence. Brent shook his head, looking serious. "Man," he muttered, "what kind of creatures could create this much magic?" He really didn't want to go any closer, but Adam was waiting impatiently behind him. Brent sighed and gave in. "It's right up ahead, but it's super dangerous. Are you sure you want to do this?" Adam nodded. Then, akaboom, something blasted into the sky and came crashing back down. What was that? Adam turned toward the noise, then looked at Brent with a questioning glance. The S-rank hunter's mouth dropped in shock. What just happened? He stuttered. "If I'm not mistaken." The other hunter started slowly, hesitating a bit before adding, "I think that was Mr. Andre." "What?" Adam's eyes widened in horror as he pushed his friend to hurry. "Come on. We need to go now." Brent waved for the others to follow and took off after Adam, their group rushing away in a panic. They arrived at the crash site. An Asian hunter was pounding on the supposedly unbeatable Thomas Andre. Pow, pow, pow. Brent's eyes widened in shock as he pointed at the two fighters. "Mr. Andre, he's getting totally beaten by Hunter Sung. I can see that." Adam didn't know what to do. Even from where they were standing, it was clear Thomas wasn't doing well. Brent looked just as lost as Adam felt. "What should we do?" "We need to stop them." "Are you really going to watch a national-level hunter get beaten up?" "Stop who?" "Stop him." Brent stared at the Asian hunter, who was giving off so much magic power that he didn't dare get closer. But before Brent could react, Adam sprinted toward them. Adam was just an ordinary agent, but here he was, acting super brave, even though he didn't have any magic. Brent knew even a little magic from high-ranking hunters could be deadly for him. He wasn't sure what to do, but then he groaned and went forward anyway. "Agent White," someone shouted. Thomas got hit in the head with an elbow and dropped to his hands and knees. His fingers dug into the dirt. He cried out. He pushed himself up, but now he was much weaker. His punches didn't have nearly as much power as before.